Hey there guys, it's Josh here. Just before we get into today's video, I've got a quick announcement. So as you guys all know, I am a commissioned painter, but I've now finally got myself a website. So I'll have a link down to it below where you can see the gallery of all my previous stuff. Get in touch with me on there if you've got stuff that you're interested in getting painted and you want to quote and learn a bit more about how I work and what I've done. You can have a talk about that and you can learn a bit more about how that works. Anyway, on with the video. Cool, so 6 advantages of Chaos Space Marines, take 1. Hello there and welcome back to JJ Painting. I am JJ and today, as you can tell from the title, we are going to be talking about Chaos Space Marines and the advantages that they have over regular Space Marines. Now, two things I want to clarify quickly before we get too far into it. Now, the first thing I'm going to be talking about is the Space Marine Codex next to the Chaos Space Marine Codex specifically. So we're not going to be talking about things like Death Guard or Grey Knights or Thousand Suns. We will be talking a little bit about the supplements, but not to a massive degree, because I know that the structuring of the Space Marines as a whole has changed quite a lot very recently. But that's what we're going to be talking about. The second thing I want to make very clear is that there are a lot of things that Space Marines do have that Chaos Marines don't have. So again, I'm not saying Space Marines are bad in any way, shape or form, but these are some things that Chaos Marines have that Space Marines simply don't have access to or can't exploit in the same way on the tabletop. And for today, we're going to be painting this model right here. See that? Anyway, let's crack on. Number 6, greater variety of characters. Alright, so before any of you pounce to the comments, the first thing I want to say about that is this. There are many varieties and many entries in the HQ choices of Space Marines, granted, but they are all mostly variants on the same thing, and I did some maths to figure this out, in fact. So there are 7 captains, 4 lieutenants, 4 chaplains, 3 librarians, and 2 tech marines. So that's multiple iterations of the same thing, either firstborn or primaris, on a bike, with a jump pack, on foot. It ultimately doesn't really matter that much. That is what we've got. And over in the Chaos Space Marine corner, yes, we also have several different Chaos Lords who are on bikes, on foot, have jump packs, or have, you know, Terminator armor. That's fine, we know that already. They also have the equivalent of captains, their lords, lieutenants, exalted champions, chaplains, dark apostles, librarians, sorcerers, tech marines, tech marine, warpsmith. Yes, they do have their equivalents of all those things. However, the thing I then like to point out is that they also have demon princes, literally demonically possessed space marine lords, which have been elevated to the ranks of demons, which gives them a monstrous creature option that can fly and cast psychic powers. That is something Space Marines do not have equivalent to, and no, Primarchs don't count because there are also demon Primarchs which are in a league of their own as well. On top of that, they've also got a Lord of Vehicles that's mounted on a giant demonic walker. Again, Space Marines don't really have anything to equate that to. So when you've got things like that, and you put that into perspective also with the fact that there are things like Greater Possessed and the Lord of Executions, which granted there are some parallels with the Space Marine Codex, overall it does mean that your HQ choices and your character choices within your Chaos Space Marine army can have more variety. You're not just limited to a guy on a bike, a guy with a jump pack, a guy in really heavy armor, or a guy in even heavier armor. You can literally have demonically possessed lords and guys riding giant armoured monsters. That's quite cool, and as a result, it means their playstyle is even more divergent from Space Marines, and it adds a lot to it. Number 5, more flexible units overall. Now, this is one of the great ironies about the Tactical Squad, is that the Tactical Squad, in some respects, is slightly less tactically flexible than a Chaos Space Marine squad. As of the most recent edition, you can have 2 heavy weapons or 2 special weapons in a 10-man unit of Chaos Space Marines. With the Tactical Marines, you are now, as ever, limited to 1 special and 1 heavy weapon. Now, that is small fry in the grand scheme of things, I appreciate that, but again, it means that you can actually have a bit more loadout options. You can have Chaos Space Marines that are designed to engage at range, or engage at close range. It really is down to you. Chaos Space Marines also can have bolt pistols and chainswords. Space Marines, again, are just limited to bolt guns. I've said recently that intercessors can have the assault intercessor option now, but that's a whole other unit, and those assault intercessors can't take things like melter guns and plasma guns. They need to have a whole other unit to carry those into battle for them. Now, when you also think that carries over, that's not just in the core units. In the Terminators for Space Marines, you have 1 unit of Terminators that is dedicated to having Thunderhammers and Storm Shield, and another unit dedicated to having guns. When it comes to Chaos Marines, you can literally blend that as much as you want. You can have Lightning Claws and Combi Guns and Reaper autocannons. Ultimately, I will acknowledge that it is a shame Chaos Space Marines don't have access to things like Storm Shields or to Thunderhammers. or to assault cannons to a degree, but that's not to say they're useless. They do still have access to things like chain axes, power swords, which incidentally are two things Space Marine Terminators don't have any access to, Reaver autocannons. So the equipment of the two of them is very different, so ultimately they do fulfill ever so slightly different roles, but I think Chaos Terminators, as a result, have become more flexible because of it. And so much more so that people are a little bit more able to experiment and swap in and out things in one unit, rather than needing to have either close combat Terminators in one thing or shooting Terminators in another. And then we have the Chosen, who have survived the ages, almost completely unchanged. Now they going to have 2 wounds, which is going to be wonderful. And again, they can have multi-melters, plasma guns, multiples of all of those things, giving all of them power swords, giving them all lightning claws if you want. It's entirely down to you. And I think that does show the level of flexibility that they have over Space Marines really does stand up on its own. They aren't limited to single-use units like Primaris are, and arguably, as Firstborn are, if not to the same degree. It really does give absolute flexibility in ways that Space Marines simply do not have. Number 4. Obliterators over Centurions. Now this is a really specific thing, and I do appreciate that this might be on a few people if you don't know them that well. For context, Centurions when they first came out were the mobile Devastator squad. You could put them in a drop pod, drop them down, and they come up with their grav cannons, las cannons or heavy bolters, and spray firepower onto whatever you wanted made dead. But now they can't go in drop pods anymore. They're limited to land radio transport, and they are incredibly slow. They can only go 4 inches. That is not very far. Conversely, Obliterators get more shots out at a slightly lower price, I believe, and can also deep strike. There's more of a random factor involved, that is true, but ultimately you get more bang for your buck. Obliterators have a similar number of wounds, but they put out more shots. They are reliably the equivalent of at least an autocannon, and if you have more than one of them, you can obviously still split your fire, which makes them more effective. Couple that with the fact that Obliterators do have some close combat capabilities as well with their crushing claws. They actually come out overall slightly more well-rounded than Centurions, who again, you're stuck with either having things that are designed for ranged assault or designed for close combat, maybe with a bit of close range support. But that's really the options there. So I think that's all I need to really say about Obliterators, because to be honest with you, there's not much else to be said. They have an advantage over Centurions, and as such do give more mobility to Space Marine firepower on the whole. Number 3, Death to the False Emperor. Again, this is one which doesn't need dwelling on too much. Chaos Space Marines, all Chaos Space Marines, have a rule. When they're in combat with anything that's of the Imperium, it's an exploding 6. So if you roll to hit, if you hit on an unmodified 6, you get to roll another hit. I was saying it's 6+ actually, yeah, sorry. It's 6+ for Chaos Marines, and they get an extra hit. Now, that used to just be Space Marines, but now it's all Imperium. So it doesn't matter if you're fighting Astra Militarum, Sisters of Silence, or Imperial Knights, you will always get the extra hit in if you are a Chaos Space Marine unit fighting an Imperium unit. That is something which they have. Space Marines have to pay a stratagem to have that, and bearing in mind that the majority of opponents you'll be facing probably have Space Marines or an Imperial derivative, that immediately means that Chaos Space Marines are coming in with an extra rule that they can use on everything else, coupled with the fact that they obviously get things like Hateful Assault, which is their equivalent of Shock Assault, and when you factor that into even relatively combat light Chaos Marine armies, there's still going to be a lot of units that can make the most out of that rule. It's very good. Number 2, God-specific units. God-specific units, I mean Khorne Berserkers, Plague Marines, Thousand Suns, and of course, Noise Marines. Now, the funny thing about all of those is that they've stayed in the Codex, by and large, and that's good. I think there was some worry that Rubric Marines might disappear from the Chaos Marine Codex when the Thousand Suns got theirs. That didn't happen. They're still there, and as far as I'm aware, they will stay there. Obviously, these are all elite choices, but they represent one of the last things of a dying age, which is elites becoming troops in certain armies. I'm of course talking about Khorne Berserkers with the World Eaters and Noise Marines with the Emperor's Children. Both of those armies are still holding on to traditions which most other armies don't really have anymore, wherein you can have those units as troop units if they are fit a certain legion. And both of those units obviously fit those legions very well. They are both respectively Khorne and Slaanesh, leaning legions historically, and that is something they still have. But when you think about that in a bit broader perspective, so when you think about, for example, Iron Warriors can have Khorne Berserkers, they can also have Rubric Marines. that means that their legion traits also work in there, and suddenly you have synergy for god-specific units transferring from legions that aren't considered to be god-specific to god-specific units. Plague Marines from the Alpha Legion, or Rubric Marines from the Night Lords, or one of my favourites, to be honest with you, Rubric Marines for the Alpha Legion. These are all things that they can have, and as a result you start to see the synergy building up between units more and more. Now, when it comes to Chaos Marines, I think that that's a really important thing. Your armies need to be a bit more layered than they do in some other cases, and that's really where the strength of them lies, not just in one overtly obvious advantage. A lot of it does come in a slightly more subtle manner than people appreciate, but this is why I'm here, to, you know, help spread the word. When you start subtly layering things with Chaos Marines, that's when you start to see results, and I think this is one where they do definitely see it. Number 1, better psyches and warlord traits. So, pretty much from 6th edition onwards, this has been one which hasn't really changed much. Chaos Space Marines have always seemed to find much more utility in their psychic abilities and warlord traits. If we look at the Space Marine psychic abilities as they are now, they have some okay things there. They have things like Null Zone, it turns off invulnerable saves. Chaos Marines also have that. They also have Might of Heroes, which allows them to always strike first. Again, that's something which is good and quite situational, although unfortunately. However, when you look at other things like Fury of the Ancients and Might of Heroes are both nice, but they don't have enough of a range. Whereas things like Prescience, which just gives you flat buffs on all of your units, is always useful. Warp Time, which allows you to move a unit, again, always a useful spell to have. These are things which Chaos Marines have in abundance, which is simply not available to Space Marines. Even the demonic leaning powers of the Malefic discipline, they can only affect possessed units largely, but at the same time, there are more possessed units than there are Phobos units in the Chaos Marine Codex next to the Space Marine Codex, because obviously there are demon engines, there's Possessed, there's Obliterators, Demon Princes, Mutilators, there's far more. So even if those powers overall aren't quite as useful to the army, there's still more units that can benefit from them than there are from the Obscuration discipline in the Space Marine Codex. And if I get onto those warlord traits as well, now the sad truth is Chaos Marines don't have 2 charts of warlord traits, one for demons and one for, you know, normal Space Marines. But that's fine, because if you were to go through the Space Marine list, often you will see the same 2 or 3 warlord traits crop up on most people's boards. Those warlord traits tending to be Imperium Sword, Iron Resolve, and maybe Champion of Humanity. But for Chaos Marines, Eternal Vendetta, Flames of Spite. But for Chaos Marines, you will see more of the generic warlord traits appearing across the army, across different things, because different legions and different ways of playing tend to fit each one of those warlord traits better. And ultimately, I think that's quite representative, that with Space Marines, most people go straight for the chapter-specific traits if they're playing a first founding chapter. Or they will go for the Vanguard traits if they can, because to be fair, the Vanguard traits are better. But again, only a limited number of their characters can have them. And it says a lot more that more Chaos Marine players seem to have a greater choice when it comes to the 6 warlord traits they have, rather than the 6 warlord traits of the Space Marine. So again, just to recap what we've learned today, the advantages of Chaos Marines are more variety of characters, more flexible units, effectively more mobile fire support, a special rule designed specifically to fight their hated foes, the Imperium, god-specific units able to blend and synergize better with the rest of their army, and psychic powers and warlord traits as a baseline are on a much better level. But as always, I want to leave the last words with you. What other advantages do you think Chaos Marines have over Space Marines? And what do you think I could have added to this list? Do you disagree? Do you think that Space Marines are just inherently superior to Chaos Marines? In which case, that's fine. You know, tell me how I'm wrong in the comments. Please do. And thank you for watching. Like I said, I leave this over to you. I look forward to hearing from you. Tell me your thoughts. So, there we have it. Our 6 advantages that Chaos Space Marines have over regular Space Marines. If you guys have anything that you think I missed out, anything that should be on that list that wasn't there, then please do let me know. And obviously we've now finished painting our Greater Possessed, and he looks like this. I'm happy with how he turned out. He looks okay in my opinion. But like I said, thank you all very, very much for watching. Like, subscribe, comment below. I do try to get videos out now every Wednesday and Friday, so keep tuned for those. And if you go over to my Challenge 99 series, video number 6, if we can get that to 100 likes on that video, then I will freehand the chapter symbol on that model. But in any case, thank you all very, very much for watching. Goodbye, and have a lovely day.